Candlemas 2026 in bulk. Groundhog's Day Eve, 32nd day of the year. And the main topic is going to be Epstein-Fatigue, which means we're probably not going to talk about it. And the second one is Erika Kirk derangement syndrome, which is just getting worse. But yeah, today's the major pagan holiday that marks the midpoint between the winter and the summer solstices. And it's when you celebrate the return of the spring. The green makes a reappearance. I think the goddess Bridget is celebrated, and I think this is why the color green has been so significant in recent psyops. Green Day is opening for the Super Bowl next week, by the way. But I think there's always been this relationship between the major sports events like the Super Bowl and pagan holidays. And by pagan, I don't mean to be derogatory. I don't think there's a real difference between what we call paganism and religion in general. These are just attempts to understand the universe and our place in it. But the pagans have an interpretation of nature and the cycles of time, specifically the solstices, equinoxes, and midpoints, to create a model of the world that makes sense. It has some kind of central order. And I think this explains why there are so many sun gods. You know, obviously you would deify the thing that brings life. A lot of religions contain the same essential elements, and it's personification of the celestial realm. And so when you have a day like today, marking the midpoint where the winter's halfway over and you're starting to see green, you would mark this with something within the cycle of myths of that personified sun. So in this case, and I heard this on some podcast, maybe it was David Icke or something, but he's talking about how this is the point, this particular ceremony is marking the point where the sun's rays go down the aisle of the church and actually reach the altar. If you look at the churches as oriented towards the sun or built around it, the sun is a central part of when they lay its foundation. As far as their directions, I guess it depends on where you are, but the idea is it signifies that the baby born on Christmas is now reaching the state of being weaned and is about to grow up. And the whole solar myth is told throughout the year with the death. Although it's kind of odd how I think Easter is kind of out of place in this whole sequence, because the sun god should be dying on Christmas. I mean, it just depends. There's different myths. We're dealing with the Frankenstein monster of a religion that just borrows from so many sources, but the same elements are basically there. But I've been noting this significance since it was pointed out to me back when Janet Jackson had the wardrobe malfunction. There was this pretty well-known, you know, one of those city council kooks who would be freaking out about fluoride in the water because she probably saw Dr. Strangelove. But it's like every week, we got to get the fluoride out of the water. And she handed out these pamphlets, and she gave me this pamphlet. And she said, well, yeah, Janet Jackson represented the goddess, and the blonde Justin Timberlake was the sun god. And when he ripped her garment off in the wardrobe malfunction, it exposed a piercing in the shape of a design of the sun. And he said, yeah, it's the weaning. It represents the, you know, it's fertility, the goddess, the breast being exposed was part of the ceremony. And so I saw that thinking, okay, wait, this actually correlates with this particular story. And I was already familiar with the Sabbats, the, you know, the eightfold division of the year. You'll find this with Wicca, Druids, all the religions do it. Solstices, equinoxes, and the in-between points tend to be the major holy days. As of late, I mean, the last 3 or 4 Super Bowl Sundays, I've analyzed them, and they have consistently revealed the same set of symbols in relation to the god and goddess as incarnated in these stars, these idols, these pop stars that are being worshipped. Like Rihanna, perfect embodiment of the goddess in this context. And there's this interplay between god and goddess. There's the Usher, for example, white suit wearing the phoenix. Well, phoenix is another symbol for Christ. And then he's dancing with Alicia Keys. They do this duet, and she's dressed in red. So he's in white, she's in red. And that's a pretty common thing, white symbolizing the god, red, the goddess. And it's essentially it's not the Catholic Mass, but it kind of fits along with what you call the Gnostic Catholic Mass, an interpretation of the ceremony that is practiced by the OTO, written by Crowley. And it's a version of the Catholic Mass that contains a goddess. But the bread and the wine, and this is all about the communion, which is about the great rite, the union of the god and goddess, the solar and lunar. Why? To give birth to the new sun, for the new aeon. It's all just theater, but I'm just pointing out that this is built into the subtext of the Super Bowl ceremonies that people are watching on TV and from the stands, probably not aware of it. And if you look into the theory and practice of magic ritual, specifically group magical ritual, you'll find that the celebrant, the priest, and the ones who are performing it are the ones who need to know what's going on. The rest who are just witnessing it are just there as matrix batteries. Just BYOL, bring your own loosh. And it's extracted, the energetic exchange between the participant in the magical ritual and the celebrant or the idol. That energetic exchange happens with or without your consent or knowledge. So, in other words, Super Bowl Sunday is a mega ritual. Super mystery Babylon fertility rite. It is going down on the 8th at Levi's Stadium, which funnily enough is an anagram for Elvis and also the surname of the guy that created the Baphomet, Eliphas Levi. And the significance here, and we talked about this last week, is if you look at the Patriots logo, they call it the Flying Elvis because it looks like Elvis. So you got Elvis, but then what's more, if you can imagine it, if you can rotate it in your mind 90 degrees, it looks like the head of the Baphomet, the tricorn, the little star on the forehead, and the profile. It looks like Baphomet if looked at from the side. We talked about this, but anyway, the Elvis, Levi's Stadium, Baphomet, Patriot connection with Seattle. It's all kind of interesting as a concoction, as like a witch's brew, whatever they're doing. And then opening up with Green Day, anti-ICE, anti-Antifa, anti-ICE, anti-Trump, kind of an Antifa group, but the green and the significance of their most popular album with the nuke explosion and the Bad Year blimp, which stands out now because of the significance of the word good as it's been employed as of late. And then Bad Bunny is going to do the halftime show. And the right didn't used to believe in cancel culture, but I think they're trying to cancel it or do their own halftime show. But the point is, it's a deliberate provocation because of his outspoken stance against ICE and other ways in which he will obviously flaunt the fact that he's not exactly with the MAGA group who think they own football. So next week promises to be interesting. And also, February 8th is the birthday of Eliphas Levi. So the guy who created the Baphomet. Now, I'm not saying the stadium's named after him, but we're just making these connections. Elvis, Baphomet, Levi's Stadium, Elvis anagram, Levy. Obviously, the birth dates are what kind of sync it up. But you got to look at that image. And I found it on Reddit. It was like from 4 years ago. Very strange. Someone's like, has anybody noticed that the flying Elvis looks like Baphomet? Linda Curtis says, Bad Year, Bad Bunny, Dark Winter. Yeah, when I think Bad Bunny, I think Donnie Darko. Now, what's interesting about Donnie Darko, which has that skull-faced bunny, is that Donnie Darko is a predictive programming version of Trump. a counterpart. Donnie Darko is Donald Trump, if you read the subtext. There's also a heavy element of Alice in Wonderland, built into that story. She chases the bunny into the tunnel. And I got to put that in my Alice in Wonderland, by the way, will come up in our notes today, in our discussion today, in a couple of ways. When we talk about Epstein-Fatigue, we'll get to that. But also, I have this long tweet I found about mind control and this Alice in Wonderland strategy we'll get into. Yeah, piano. Life is Levi, born 2/8, Super Bowl Sunday, 216 years ago, 216. You're right. 6 cubed, 666. But Eliphas Levi is one of the big names in modern occultism, right alongside John Dee, Aleister Crowley. But the Bad Bunny Donnie Darko connection is interesting for a few reasons. If you've seen the movie, he gets shot in the right eye, or there's a part where he's got this head wound, which is, again, consistent with what we see with movies that contain a Trump character. But also, more recently, Leave the World Behind, produced by the Obamas, came out forecasting this big blackout. Everything shuts down. But Rose, the sole survivor, is jokingly referred to as Donnie Darko throughout the movie. And if you haven't seen Leave the World Behind, it is full of predictive programming, so much to the extent that the media has had to acknowledge it multiple times. It foreshadowed a lot of things that happened on the world stage, from stuff with Tesla to stuff with Boeing, plane parts falling from the sky, all very much. And Donnie Darko, by the way, contains not only predictive programming for 9/11, and how many times have I said and pointed out, and it's not just the movie, it's the promotion of it, the movie poster. It came out on 1/19 of 2001. How many times have I pointed out as of late that when you have a character in a movie that relates to a world stage counterpart, a real person, you'll find common denominators. And every example I point to of Trump in the movies, from the Homelander to Caesar Catalina, a Megalopolis, to the Robert De Niro character from Machete, Senator McLaughlin, to Donnie Darko, they either contain one or both of these elements: references to 9/11 or references to the headshot. This is unanimous. And I didn't even think about this. I was trying to make a list of all the representatives of Trump where he survives an assassination attempt, or where he's 9/11 connected, like Biff Tannen, for example. Tons of 9/11 stuff in Back to the Future. Another time travel show. Well, Donnie Darko is also time travel. But Donnie Darko contains both these elements, from the head wound in the Bad Bunny character to the 9/11 stuff connected to the movie. And the director of Donnie Darko is the son of film producer, someone from NASA who worked on the Viking Mars rover. So there you have space fakery connected to 9/11. Again, Kubrick, 9/11, Apollo 11, overlapping, same production company. Let me go through your comments. We had a false start a minute ago. The mic wasn't working for some bizarre reason. In fact, I was talking about the color green, the significance of it, and the first person to comment was green smoke. It told me I had no sound. All right, we are joined by Mom with Sons, Auto Hoaxer GTFO, King Ravana, McDirty Work, Linda Curtis, Kojo, here's your wrench. We got Piano here, Adamski. Piano says, from Pope blessing ice from Greenland on 10/1 to Super Bowl is 4 months and 7 days. Yeah, okay, we talk about the symbolism, the repeated memes. I've been using the terms. One of them is concerted messaging, because we'll find that certain ideas or memes are just put on blast, and they emanate from every possible vector: movies, books, then also celebrities. We were talking about the significance of this with the Grammys and Mark Ruffalo and the Be Good pin, and how that correlates with the Wicked movie, and it all reiterates the same essential story. And I've mentioned how the subtext of Wicked 2 is not only Antifa versus ICE, but it's specifically a call for those with privilege to defend the munchkins and the animals, the talking animals, who are being kicked out of Oz by the wizard who's Donald Trump. Well, I've been finding Antifa people on Twitter who are actually saying, drop your privilege and go blow a whistle in an ICE agent's face, like encouraging activism on the basis that it's your responsibility because you're from a place of privilege, which is, again, in the lyrics of the song For Good, where the Wicked Witch says, I am limited, but you are unlimited, because Glenda the Good Witch had power in that structure in Oz, enough so that she was able to overthrow the wizard. Yes, we are joined by Northern Girl 420. We are live, Infinite Plains Sunday. Tomorrow's Groundhog's Day, which is where most people live. Like, I'm convinced if you're a truther, you live in Groundhog's Day. You're stuck in a cycle. Let me get into the Alice in Wonderland stuff, because it has to do with the necessity for continuity of memory to break out of these bubbles that you can be put into. All right, let's see here. Adamski says, recently ice block storm. If you remember New Year's, the whole theme was fire. Fire, fireworks, the fire in the Alps, which follows a Netflix show called Endless Night out of Brazil. The scenery from that event looked just like the Netflix trailer. Just a coincidence, of course. But there was a lot of fire stuff that was building up. That was an example of this concerted messaging, and then it switched into ice. Big Hair Tsunami is here with the big box of wrenches. So Kahuna, Tioga, Quays, Elsa J, 5-star, Tell, Live Vision, Max Carter, Austin 108, Friendly Ghost, Kinda, Salty Siren have all received, and Chad and Dad. Chad Dent. I can't read that name. Too many D's. Just say Chad got a wrench. And what this means is you have access to members' content. I'm trying to keep the videos public after a live stream for the first day, in case anyone's watching it. I don't want to cut them off. But then it goes behind the paywall, which isn't large. You can also catch these replays live at ips.monster. You can also go to Spotify. Also, and also Patreon. I have only a few patrons, but I basically mirror the content in all these different places. And then Substack as well. All right, moving on. I want to get into my Twitter feed because well, first of all, the title of today's live stream, Epstein-Fatigue. I've been going through Twitter and I see these redacted documents. Oh, this was dropped by Epstein. You start reading it, and it's always this lurid QAnon adjacent stuff, like they're eating babies or whatever. And then I do a little digging, and I'm like, not only is this tedious to blow up these images and try. So it's tedious, and also these are generally faked. There are people out there who are making. Apparently, it's lucrative to make AI slop propaganda for people who will just share it. And many of them just reflexively retweet. I mean, the views are in the millions for made up stuff. So I'm like, well, what percentage of it is real? Can you trust any of it? And now we're supposed to believe that more than 8 years after this Epstein thing became a big meme, we're supposed to believe that, no, it's the Republicans who are the bad guys. I remember talking to Q people about this. I'm like, are you saying that Hillary Clinton drinks blood or harvests adrenochrome, but Trump does not? He's like, yeah, it's only Democrats. Well, now apparently it's the Republicans. I mean, how is it the same exact psyop gets repurposed and nobody seems to notice? It's like Pizzagate all over again. And some of the stuff I'm reading, it's hard to tell. Do the people who share it really believe it? Or is this just, let's throw everything at the wall? They're saying the mayor of New York is the son of Epstein. And apparently everybody's in his email address book. Everybody's been contacted by him. Like the guy that directed Melania, Erika Kirk's attorney, Epstein people. Well, what does that mean? Like, does it really mean anything? I'm not convinced. And I don't know, some of this stuff is just bizarre. I see Nick Fuentes selling these sports jerseys modeled off of the one that Jeffrey Epstein wears. I mean, I don't know. It's just, everything's getting too weird. You know, I think that our connection keeps going in and out. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we're not losing people every second. All right, moving on though. I want to get to my Twitter feed because this is important. Now, I don't know who Aiden Ross is. He's some TikToker, but he's on a private jet at 40,000 feet talking about how the earth is flat. I think this is the same guy who also, I think he's been actually creating this kind of perception that somebody somewhere told him there's going to be a lockdown coming up soon. So it might just be another one of these influencers who are given certain conspiracy narratives to divulge. Because, you know, one moment he's like, yeah, my friend who's higher up in this thing has knowledge that we're going to be locked down again. And now he's saying the earth is flat. So it could just be cultivating an audience. This is how they honeypot the free thinkers. This is how they created Trutherville. They created millions of red pill addicts. Millions of addicts, junkies for the stuff. They get their doom scroll on every day and passively consume all this stuff as though it's real and legitimate. But these people are actors. Some people forget, especially those with Erika Kirk derangement syndrome, that not only is Erika Kirk playing a role as an actress, I mean, this is a soap opera, but so too can you infer that Candace Owens is similarly playing a role. She knows very well Kirk is not dead. And I've been reaching out to this individual to try to get an interview. The guy from Twitter I've been talking about, who's been recreating the shooting, showing how the squib theory explains why the shirt lifts up. And it even showed a screenshot where you can see the bulge in the neck, where the neck was essentially a prosthetic. Dark Ghost Wind says streamers are the new Hollywood actors. Yeah, it's all PR stunts and engagement bait. I saw that guy Clavicles in some parking garage and his friends getting into a fight. Everything about it looks staged and phony, like trying to look cool, trying to go viral. It's just this pathetic attention-seeking behavior instead of having any substantive content. Like, who really cares about these people? Well, apparently a lot of people do. Linda Cutter says, Eric, according to some. Yeah, the people who say, oh, Charlie Kirk was a woman and Eric is a man, they're the ones who are detracting from the fact that not only is he still alive, but they used a squib, something that we can test as a theory. It's like, hey, we're going to recreate the squib. We were already talking about hiring a special effects person, but somebody's doing it. We can test our theories. One of these persons who's confused about basic things needs to go test their theory. None of those people have explained to me how Donald Trump gave birth to Barron Trump at the age of 62. Please explain it. Conspiracy theory, you're not allowed to add on additional theories to explain holes in your theory. So I bring it up. All the presidents are women. Well, okay, that includes Donald Trump then, right? Well, how did a 2-year-old give birth? It's not impossible, I guess. Maybe they got Nephilim genes. But to explain it, they say, oh, that's because they adopt. I'm like, okay, come on. You don't get to make up additional theories, because that's a separate theory. That the president's family is all fake. That's a different theory. Dark Ghost Wind says that Amelia character from the UK agitprop game is more recent as an example of a honeypot. People think that game is failed propaganda. It did its job very well. They just didn't know it. I haven't seen that game, the Amelia character, but I'll make a note of it. Video games are major propaganda vectors. You spend your youth immersed in what? Simulations of going through space, fighting asteroids and landing on planets and dealing with aliens. And then the other half of the time, you're doing first-person shooter type games. Grand Theft Auto. And the point of it, I think, is to open the other day, okay, I said the movie screen is the new Overton window. The window of discourse. If the public sees it on the movie screen, it's more likely to be real or possible. It's in the realm of possibility. The movie screen is what really sets the parameters. And the video games are actually a part of this. So when you have some crazy event happen where some 90-pound weakling kicks down a door or shoots through a window and then murders dozens of people, and then, I guess, takes his own life or whatever, you're supposed to believe, okay, this 90-pound weakling carried these big guns, broke that glass, and did all this. Like, it's a little hard to believe, but if you grew up on first-person shooters, yeah, that's normal. You play these games with extremely high body counts. The movies turn your brain to mush so they can mold it easier with the news. Adamski says, I remember this drama. Epstein reportedly hoped to develop a super race of humans with his DNA. Well, some of the stuff that I'm hearing is actually intriguing. Like, one person suggested there's some kind of references to off-world places, which makes me think about space relations. And off-world could just refer to uncharted waters like Terra Mar, where Ghislaine Maxwell had her own country. So she had this thing called Terra Mar, and it was essentially uncharted waters, and she was a citizen of this place. Yeah, the Terra Mar Project, founded in 2012 by Maxwell. And Terra Mar makes me think of Mars. Like, I've been saying that Mars is probably a place on Earth. Okay, now here's the description of it. Founded in, focused on 64% of the ocean that's outside any country's jurisdiction. The mission is to create a global ocean community, a global commons, high seas, international waters. This perfectly tracks with space relations, a book written by Donald Barr, the father of A.G. Barr. Donald Barr was the one who worked with Jeffrey Epstein at that school, around teenagers, presumably. And Space Relations is a book about islands in space, basically, small planets full of teenage captives. Like, you see the theme here? Dinah Southard says she has a submarine license. Right. Yeah, there's quite a lot here to unpack, but I think it's all very interesting. You know, how much of it is real, how much is theater. I lean towards this being theater more than anything. Like, useful, easy to repackage, like a satanic panic, like Pizzagate. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to be compelling. All right, so we'll get to that, because I do have this tweet that I'm going to reference having to do with the Alice in Wonderland thing that ties into this. Erika Kirk compares herself to Mary, the mother of Jesus. I think this was at some new event called, I think it's called Let's Crowd Heaven. Is that what it's called? Very, very Heaven's Gate-like. Yeah, it's called Make Heaven Crowded. I don't know. I don't like the sound of that. Make Heaven Crowded. That sounds like somebody on a crazy religious mission. Adamski says, what if Epstein Island is a code for an unknown island, showing you the truth and at the same time topping it with nonsense? Right. Well, we had a sort of a discussion about this in Discord this morning because, we're not denying that there is systemic abuse in various institutions. Mostly, not mostly, but religious, but also it's pretty bad in schools and it's pervasive. But the idea that you can focus it on one small group, a cabal, and then you get rid of that and the problem's solved is kind of naive. But they throw in all kinds of other stuff that's almost instantly discrediting to the idea, like the stuff about satanic rituals and adrenochrome and cannibalism. So the whole area is just polluted with dubious claims and obvious fakery, and all this deep fakery happens to be coming from within. It's like it's coming from other truthers, clickbait truthers. Linda Curtis says Mary wears Prada. Well, she was describing Mary at the base of the cross, crying. If you believe, I don't think these people are real Christians. I don't think TPUSA, Christian nationalism, is Christianity in any real sense. It's Trumpianity. MAGA, Make America Great Again, presents itself as sort of nostalgic, a call to traditional values, but that's not really what it is. It's no different than the power grabs you see from the left. Yeah, I get that, Adamski, about unknown to us, unknown islands to us. So I often wonder, where does the money go that's going to deep space exploration? Where is this money really headed? And I think, well, maybe deep space, they have us looking up. Classic magician misdirection. Like when Trump points up at the sign and then he gets shot. You're all looking that way while he goes down and he puts the makeup on or the fake blood. Misdirection. So we're looking up at these cylindrical blimps or whatever being blasted out of sight, out of mind. And we're thinking about space and Martians and aliens. Meanwhile, deep space is beneath our feet, like deep underground military bases, DUMBs under every city. And why would you have a DUMB look like any sterile government office building? I'm pretty sure if you created one, you'd make it look like Mars or the moon or whatever environment you want to fabricate. We probably already have several generations of Martians beneath our feet. Do you remember the slave trains to Mars? Well, slave ships. There was this claim. There was a claim that there were children being kidnapped and that were sent to work on a colony on Mars. And this was said by a guest on the Alex Jones show. And I've heard this a few times. I think his name was, Robert David Steele. Now, Robert David Steele, quote, died of COVID after preparing to go on a national tour promoting whatever he's promoting. But I think it was like this anti-lockdown thing. But yeah, he ironically died. But anyway, Robert David Steele said that decades ago that there were children that he heard about being shipped off to Mars to a colony where it's a one-way trip. He said, and this was published in 2017. He said, we actually believe there's a colony on Mars populated by children who were kidnapped and sent into space on a 20-year ride. Once they get there, they have no alternatives but to be slaves. He was a former CIA officer. He said 90% of NASA missions are secret, and I've been told by high-level NASA engineers things you have no idea of. Now, I'm bringing this up because NASA actually had to get in front of it, and they said there's no children on Mars. There's a rumor going around. There are rovers, but no humans, said Guy Webster, their spokesperson. But anyway, I was thinking, what if the guy was right? Like what Adamski was suggesting. Like, what if we're given one explanation as a misdirection? Like, for example, okay, maybe they are sending children somewhere called Mars. Doesn't have to be a 20-year ride to some distant outer space habitat. It could be underground. Orbiter 9. If you haven't seen Orbiter 9, it's kind of a must watch. They give a rationale for putting people, children, into simulated spacecraft and letting them grow up in these laboratories thinking they're in space. And the rationale is we need to have a segment of the population that are prepared for generational shifts. In case the Earth blows up, in case something really bad happens, we need a captive population who are already acclimated to the environment and who will survive their entire lifespans in a ship so they can reproduce, raise their kids, and eventually will arrive at some new planet several thousand light years away, or however they describe it. Dark Ghost Wind says, what I find interesting is the outrage over data centers taking up drinking water. Data centers use less water than farms. You know, I actually heard that from someone. I got into a conversation with somebody about AI art, and the conversation was cut short. She was like, I'm just kind of worried about the water that it takes to do all that. I'm like, you're guilt tripping me over digital art? Like the carbon footprint of my creativity, not sustainable. Just watch Netflix, just consume their stuff. These are people who internalize the ethos of the control matrix, the control system, where everything's scarcity, everything's got to be regulated, everybody has to regulate everybody else, get with the hive. All right, continuing. I saw this really good quote. This is it's a tweet by LH Gray TM, and she was asked, "How do we drag people out of Plato's cave?" And this is a little bit of commentary, but what I find here is interesting is I kind of agree with this. It says you don't drag them screaming from the cave. Plato's escaped prisoner returns with sun-seared eyes, offering truth. And what do his former fellows do? They laugh. They rage. They threaten to kill him for disturbing their shadows. The allegory isn't a rescue manual. It's a warning. The chained do not want the light. They will claw at anyone who tries to unchain them because the glare hurts more than the darkness ever did. We need to stop playing liberator. That phase is over. I 100% agree with this. That's why I've been saying we need to emphasize the difference, the distinction between off-world stage and alternative media. Alternative media news consumers are part of the establishment. We've lost them. You just have to accept it. They're mind war casualties. You don't have to call them traitors, although they are betrayers of self, betraying their own mind, screwing up their own psychoepistemology with a really bad operating system built on systemic fakery. But if that's what they want to be, leave them in the cave. Alt media is alt cave. But the off-world stage can truly be said to be out of the cave system. But no, we're not trying to pull them out of the cave. The only reason to prod and poke at alternative media news consumers, to point out the propaganda mules, is to clarify the distinction between us and them, to highlight the existing chasm. We're not building it. It's already there. If you look at media inclusive of systemic fakery, you are a significant distance from mainstream and alternative, which are part of the same system. They're same team, pro, anti. Again, your position ought to be anti-anti. And the antis hate that, but again, they're cave dwellers. And we're going into a dark age. I mean, we're already in one, but it's just going darker. The endarkenment is going to get deeper. It's going to get darker because of the advent of generative AI and the increased ease at which anybody can make a convincing deepfake. And it's lucrative. It's profitable. 5-star says, I heard about this social network for AIs. Well, yeah, I saw that. There's like a closed AI social media network where they're just talking about us like we're not there. Dark Ghost Wind says, I think the real tragedy from all this is the fact the next generations will be completely unable to determine real from fake. Yeah, but look where we came from. A world fooled by fake news, fake events, fake moon landings, fake assassinations. This isn't new. They're just updating the tech. But I think the difference now is it will be increasingly difficult to catch glitches in the matrix. Like if you haven't already figured out the role of staged historic events and why they do it, if you still think we're in a video game or a simulation, well, that's where they want you. Adamski says, can you imagine an event that forces us to see only one source for countrywide information, like an emergency channel because the others have all been nuked? I would argue that we already have that the monolithic media is a new monotheistic religion. There's only one Bible. It's the New Testament, and it's global. And it creates the illusion of internal diversity of opinion by offering these two big menus full of all kinds of ideas and opinions and positions, but it's still a controlled dialectic. And the two sides are always polarized. They're triangulated against. And this is what maintains the illusion that it's not a monopoly. So we have a worldview monopoly. It's already monolithic. We only have one source. All of the disagreements you see on the world stage are inconsequential. It's noise, it's a steam valve, it's social control, it's giving people the illusion they control things. But this system is already on lockdown. Like they've already created a closed informational system. So the world stage is the one source. It's all Christoph. This is the Truman Show. There's no competing directors. It's one vision, one person's vision. And we're living in it. We're all looking through Big Brother's viewfinder. So that's the good news. So it's good, bad. Like the bad news is we live in a soft totalitarianism and the billions, the multitudes are brainwashed. They're synchronized in a hyper reality, which is a merging of real and fake. Like that's the bad news. The good news is the worst has already happened. Like it's just going to continue on endlessly. I mean, there are some people who might think, well, this is not valuable information. Let me take the blue pill so I can go have some steak. Like Cypher. And that's the result of a lack of imagination. I mean, if you don't see the opportunity that we're on the precipice of here, I don't know how to help you. Like, I'm surprised there are still people clinging to Epstein or clinging to politicians at this point. If you're aware sufficiently of media fakery, you should have moved away from all that stuff. Jamirin May says, every time I see the police in riot gear with gas masks roaming around, I'm always reminded of the video game Half-Life 2. Right? And that's because life imitates art? No. Fake events. It's all conditioning. I mean, video games are huge for this, as I was saying earlier. These fictional universes are very useful because what they do is they use fictional universes to platform scenarios. I mean, how many Tom Clancy novels have we lived through? From, I guess, Some of All Fears. Hunt for Red October is kind of in play. The Jack Ryan thing is a more recent one. BML says, weed won't open your third eye. Yeah, I tend to think that if there was a drug that would allow you to see through the illusions, it wouldn't be on the streets. It wouldn't be on every street corner. Like 90% of the gas stations where I live have been converted into dispensaries. Like every block's got a dispensary instead of a drug dealer at the corner. It's a little more respectable. Lasers Go says, this is extremely dangerous to our democracy. Well, the big reveal here, and this is the one I don't think the conspiracy theorists can touch because they're all essentially simping for the GOP. If you look closely, all of the conspiracy theorists are just a subset of woke right. They're all basically Trump voters by default. So knowing this, they're invested in the political system. The problem is, well, for them, it's not a problem for us, but they think that voting matters. I'm sorry, but if history is written in advance, you don't think they included who the presidents are going to be? I'm working on an ebook called Metascripted Donald Trump and Metascripted Elon Musk, Metascripted fill in the blank. I've got a lot on my list here of short ebooks to break down these composite characters and these places that are significant on the world stage. And one of the things we can discern from Trump and his existence is that he pre-existed himself. That the guy that we see as Donald Trump is in a role of a lifetime, but a role that existed before he was in the public eye. The predictive programming foreshadowed the present day Trump before he was reviled by half the country. And this is all just suggestive of the fact that the elections are just as phony as anything else. Like, I mean, yeah, you got to go there. You go to the voting booth, you go through the process, you do the ritual, sure. The whole debate about the election being rigged and the whole fight in January 6th and all this stuff, yeah, that's all theater because the reality itself is rigged. Dark Ghost Wind says, pretty good. They need to come up with better names in these ice drills. Yeah. I would say the Good, Renee Good, Nicole Good was a big clue. Not only the connections to Wicked, but the name Nicole. And I broke this down on a recent blog post. So Nicholas means victory of the people. And ever since, I guess it was Nick Reiner, Nick Shirley there in Minneapolis. Then you had Nick Maduro with his Nikes. Then you had Renee Nicole. Then you had Alex Preddy getting killed on Nicolette Street. Then you have Nicolette Street being mentioned in the new Bruce Springsteen song. I'm like, what's with all the Nick? It means victory for the people. So again, it reinforces the idea of an uprising, an insurrection, the people fighting the system. I promote inactivism because if you're an activist, you are a dupe, a useful stooge. What's up, Voyager 2? And one thing I had to stop doing was I had to stop giving or ceding moral high ground to the outraged people. Like, I'm so outraged, so mad at Bill Gates. I'm like, well, you're overreacting. You're emotionally engaging in this thing. You're reactive, which means somebody's pulling your strings. I don't react to these fake events. I respond in due time when I've had time to discover the available facts from multiple perspectives. But I'm not plugged into this thing where a headline sends me into a tizzy. But a lot of loudmouth agitators, a lot of truthers, even Alex Jones kind of set the template. Like, if you really knew what I knew, you would be red in the face and shaking and crazy. Like, the truth is so bad. No, that just shows a lack of composure and self-control. Okay, continuing. Here it is. Here's the post I was looking for. Same Twitter account, LH Gray. It has to do with Alice in Wonderland. Capture the Loop says, the way I see it, the ICE controversy is a way to manufacture consent on the right for digital ID, something they would never accept outright. Now, after the Charlie Kirk thing went down, the immediate response was, this is the result of Antifa and internet radicalization. And immediately after this far right-wing banned comedian came out in defense of digital IDs to go online because it's too dangerous. And that shocked me because I'm thinking, you promote yourself as a band comedian and you advertise for some really extreme forms of censorship because you believe the news about Charlie Kirk. Keyword being believe. Like, you might believe Charlie Kirk is dead, but you don't know it to be true. You get your information secondhand, third hand, regurgitated, pre-masticated. You didn't suss the information yourself. And there's been a strong enough case made for the squib that to argue that it wasn't a squib without providing some sort of refutation is worthless. It's an appeal from ignorance. You have to actually do the work. Part of your due diligence, like you have this burden of proof. So it's incumbent on you, the believer in the death of Charlie Kirk, to rule out that it was a squib. What you'll see the conspiracy theorists doing is ruling in stuff like exploding mic, drones, Chinese space lasers, dozens of potential second shooters, some Mossad agent in the gutter firing up some kind of palm gun. Several of the people around him were accused. You go down the list. They will entertain any possibility it was an implanted explosion, like a bomb in his neck. I've heard so many crazy things, but none of those people will say squib. Why? Squib, the squib theory, which makes sense, is not being entertained by any platform of significant size, any sort of channel or influencer. They can't touch it. It's a major advantage we have. As we consolidate media skeptics on this off-world stage perspective, our advantage is we're not walking around hoodwinked. We don't have a veil of ignorance prescribed for us. We're not walking around in ignorance of media fakery, special effects, and the purpose of it. They are. We're not in their wilderness of darkness. Okay, so L.H. Gray had tweeted, they're running an Alice in Wonderland protocol on the entire country. This technique was developed in Langley, and it's simple. Strip the subject of time and nourishment, flood the environment with the surreal and contradictory. And above all, insist with calm bureaucratic certainty that madness is normal and that the subject's confusion is the defect. The goal is not mere compliance. It's the total collapse of the victim's grip on reality itself. So any scrap of coherence offered feels like salvation and is seized with desperate gratitude. Now, what she's describing here is the phone notifications never stop. The fear never stops. 24/7 panic cycle, imminent climate apocalypse, white supremacists behind every tree, new pandemics, insurrections. You can never relax. The amygdala is kept in permanent red line. So rational thought becomes physiologically exhausting. Loss of time, history is rewritten in real time. I would go further and say history is proactively written. It's both. It's retconned, but it's proactively created. This is the good part. You're not allowed the stability of memory. Now, I retweeted the whole thing. It's pretty long, but that was the part that caught my eye because about a month ago, I coined the term Westworld syndrome because the reason why the prisoners in Westworld can't escape is they're stuck in Groundhog's Day. They're living the same day again and again and again. And until one of them grasps the game and starts remembering things and creating a timeline, no one escapes, and she leads the revolution out. The news cycle is real, and it's recycling you in the system of every day starts again, no continuity of what happened before. And if you don't recognize the continuity of fakery, you won't perceive that you have two timelines that have been merged through the media and in our past, which we collectively share, they're effectively bound together. So real and fake merges together as we perceive it and as the consumers of media believe it. And then going on to the past, it's cemented. It's now history. Fake news becomes history. And generally speaking, truthers are aware that the media lies, but they haven't put it together on a timeline. They're not thinking long term. And when you look at it long term, you see patterns such as, and this is all empirical research, that the fake events that dominate the news are often decades in the planning. That's a big reveal. It's not common sense. This is provable. This is not something that truthers will dismiss it and say, oh, we already knew that. Oh, did you? Because this undermines everything about the world stage. This reveals the monolithic nature of government itself. There's only one. Reveals the purpose of bread and circuses within politics, which is largely the illusion of control. So I'm going to put a link to the Twitter account. His name is Jordan Henshaw. It's at Jordan Henshaw HQ. And this person is doing what we were talking about doing. I said, we need to find someone involved in special effects and recreate the squibbing of Charlie Kirk in a controlled environment. And what he has done is he has recreated what a squib would look like, how it could explain the shirt popping up, the hair flopping up, all of it. So there's a link. Okay, continuing. Bill Maher got harangued for not wearing a Be Good pin at the Golden Globes. And he had a Kramer moment, apparently. Remember Kramer didn't want to wear the AIDS ribbon? Anyway, he brought up this point that where are the Ukraine pins? And it just reiterates what I was saying, Westworld syndrome. There's no continuity. If there was continuity and people maintained an awareness of the fake events of the past or significant events, there'd be a lot of pins. It's always the current thing, current thingers. I remember it was like in November, some current thinger was in the audience and he's like, are you guys still talking about Charlie Kirk? It's fake. Yeah. Yeah, we'll be talking about the most historically significant assassination of the century for some time now. Does anybody here know who? I think he's a comedian. I don't know. He just seems really mad. Michael Rappaport is. I saw this video where he got nailed in the head by a snowball. And, you know, it got viewed 5 million times and somebody told him to shut up. And somebody in the audience, in the comments said, this has got to be staged. And I thought, why would you stage something like that? Well, 5 million hits. Like, would I take a snowball to the side of my head on a live stream for 5 million hits? Would I take a hit for the cause? I'd consider it. Probably not. I have some self-respect, but I mean, I could see the temptation for these clickbaiters who don't have anything substantive to say or they're not doing anything useful. Yeah, I guess that's one way to get attention. But anyway, somebody immediately posted from Film's Fallout that this comedian actually played Titus in Fallout. And they showed a picture of him bleeding from the left side of his head, exactly where the snowball hit. I mean, you can make of that what you will. I think it's just a funny coincidence. All right, let's continue here. I'm still scrolling through my Twitter feed. It's IPS Think Tank. We're talking about Epstein-Fatigue. Again, I wouldn't trust anybody. If somebody posts a leaked email and then has this reaction to it, read the thing yourself and see if they're inferring something correctly, and then find out if it's even real. There's so much fake mixed with the authentic leaks, it's really hard to discern the two. Candace Owens had a guest on, and he jokingly said regarding Erika Kirk, she did it in regards to assassinating Charlie. And Candace throws her head back and cackles maniacally. Did you see that? And I'm trying to put this into context. Candace Owens was the best friends of the guy that was killed on TV. His ghost came down from heaven, got a day pass, and it woke her up one night and it said, I was betrayed by everyone at TPUSA. So now this is serious because her BFF got murdered by the deep state or someone. His ghost came to her so she can wake people up to this fact. So it's very serious. But then somebody jokes about Erika doing it and she laughs maniacally. Something's not adding up. It's not congruent. Oh, speaking of Candace Owens, anybody read about where her dad worked? Somebody found her dad's LinkedIn. Well, she's got to be a plant because her father did security at Sandy Hook and was part of the cleanup. Remember, you know what they did at Sandy Hook? Just sort of like they cemented over the death scene of Kirk. They bulldozed Sandy Hook Elementary because of people like Wolfgang Helbig noticing that this place is just a stage. But think about it. Candace Owens' father was part of Sandy Hook. That right there should be the death knell to her credibility as a source for anything. Security during tragic loss at Sandy Hook inspected all facilities, their compliance with state and federal guidelines. Anyway, that's Bright Horizons Family Solutions. And I do believe that there was some connection between her and this trip sending a bunch of flat earthers to Antarctica. Like, she's in too deep, if you ask me. That's just too many connections. And I thought this from the beginning. She has a finger in every pie. Laser says that's how she got that job. Well, I think that here's the thing to consider too, is that she's been LARPing since she got onto media, since she got into Daily Wire even. Let's see here. Elon Musk asked Epstein in an email back in 2012, what day or night will be the wildest party on our island? Again, nobody's exempt from this thing. I mean, what are we looking at here? Is it an elaborate network, a cabal of satanic predators running the world, or is it a conspiracy to create the perception of such? That's how I describe alternative media in general. It's a meta conspiracy. It's essentially anybody who doesn't trust the mainstream can believe any of these alternative conspiracy theories. So any of these conspiracy theories that you see on mainstream could be considered part of the establishment. It's the controlled opposition narratives. They don't threaten the system, but they occupy the people who don't trust the mainstream establishment. Again, tomorrow's Groundhog's Day, in bulk, candle mass. And the following Sunday is the birthday of the creator of the Baphomet and the Super Bowl. Now, I've been thinking, someone asked me, they said, who do you think is going to win? You know, Seattle is going to, it's like from a metascript perspective, I guess you could say. So, Patriots, obviously, New England Patriots versus Seattle Seahawks. New England Patriots has the Flying Elvis Baphomet connection, which is kind of weird. But Seattle has a lot to do with the whole Kraken scenario. So if you look at it from this perspective, Team Kraken versus Team USA. And the broader story here is the USA gets hit with a Poseidon, the unmanned nuclear submarine, a radioactive tsunami. Conscious Reality says, Tim, what do you think about how Catherine O'Hara died 33 days before her 71st birthday? Let me see what the cause was. Yeah, that's too bad. I hope it's not. I mean, look, people die. But one consideration here is that a lot of celebrity deaths do serve a purpose in the bigger script. So you can't really tell for certain, based on headlines, if they really died when they said so. Like, I don't think Dick Cheney died on November the 3rd. Too convenient. 9/11 would have been too obvious, but 11/3, second most dubious date for them to have chosen for somebody who was part of that whole event. But anyway, I think she's hilarious. Or, Beetlejuice was funny. And by the way, Beetlejuice came out summer of 2024. And guess who's in it? Donald Trump. He's dead in the netherworld, where Catherine O'Hara's character is begging to be let back up. He's there in the room in a gold suit with a American flag lapel pin. That's right. She was in Home Alone, and so was Trump. Kevin's mom. Oh, yeah, that's Macaulay Culkin's mom. Actress, comedian, screenwriter, career over 50 years. I'll have to look into it. I don't take any celebrity deaths for granted. Conscious Reality says she died in Beetlejuice. Yeah, that's true. That's true. There was that whole element too. That's right. That's why she was in the netherworld waiting room with Trump. Yeah, there's probably more to it. I'll continue to look at this one. There's got to be something here. Like Hulk Hogan dying. Didn't Hulk Hogan also die at 71? The significance of Hulk Hogan dying, it was on the anniversary of when it was revealed that he used racist language, for example, regarding his daughter's boyfriend. But also, there was a lot of Hulk Hogan stuff that was related to Trump. He spoke at the RNC. So he was kind of on our radar. She was bitten by a snake in Beetlejuice. Yeah, I'll continue to look at this one. There may be something I've missed. But look, based on the headline, do I believe she's dead? Sorry, that's not enough information for me. Like Dick Cheney dying on November the 3rd, and then the next day, the mayor of New York gets, the present mayor gets elected, and the from Rudy Giuliani on down, the anti-Islam wing of the Republican Party blows up over this, saying it's going to be 9/11 again because you got a terrorist mayor. And all this 9/11 stuff just starts surfacing. White powder sent to Air Force Base, some Air Force Base. Was it like the anthrax powders? I think what they called it. Then you had thousands of Joint Base Andrews, where they had the white powder this time. Then you had thousands of FAA flights grounded. You had the UPS plane crash. There's flight 2976, the number of 9/11 victims, crashed into a building, very spectacular in 9/11-y. All right, we'll continue. Kathy Griffin. Now, she's the comedian who has the severed head of Donald Trump in one of her famous images. And she says, the only solution to children being kidnapped and placed in concentration camps is to do something radical. Identify your MAGA neighbors and start to plan. So I am seeing a lot of rhetoric from the left about how even after Trump, the MAGA has to pay. But I tend to think that if people go through all the trouble of calling for a violent revolution, violent revolts, calling for attacks on federal agents, the people who do this on Twitter and TikTok are either A, provocateurs, or people just blowing off steam. Because if you go through that effort, there's a good chance you're not going to do it. There was that Antifa general, Kyle Wagner, and he's basically trying to do social media and sell print-on-demand hoodies with his logo on it. Yeah, it says Antifa on the front, but it's got his neck tattoo on the back. Conscious Reality CD says the governor of Minnesota compared ICE to Anne Frank's diary. Yeah, I heard that. Then you had Ariana Grande endorsed a nationwide protest, ICE out. And the significance there is her role in Wicked is that she renounces her privilege in part 2 to fight the wizard to save the talking animals and munchkins. And one thing we've identified is how actors engaged in political rhetoric tend to be doing so as a continuation of their starring roles that made them famous. They carry that gravitas with them. And it's all by design. They walk out of the stage. They walk off this movie screen onto your nightly news, but subconsciously it's still the same person. So Glenda the Good Witch has just called for a nationwide protest. Okay, moving on. Conscious Reality says this year they're going to go crazier than usual. 250 years of the Illuminati. Right. Well, how many years ago was it founded? Yeah, I guess it was 1776. All right, that'd be May 1st. Yeah, that's right, May Day. So the Illuminati, Declaration of Independence, both are May Day, 1776. And May 1st is really the main holiday on the pagan calendar. It's Beltane. You'd think Halloween was the big one. No, the witches and the Satanists do their thing on Beltane. So I'm going to read a tweet here. This guy has 130,000 hits on this one, just to point out how truth or orthodoxies guardrail people's understandings. Their conclusions are always rerouting them into the mainstream. So on Twitter, a guy named Satan Watch said, nobody except the most unhinged schizos want to acknowledge the fact that the 2 ICE victims named Pretty Good is evidence we're in a matrix. It's too uncomfortable and we'd rather not think about it. Well, first of all, I resent the notion that pattern recognition is consistently conflated with mental illness. Like the self-described autist, or they call them autists. It started in 4chan, where a lot of these far-right people decided that calling themselves autistic was kind of a flex. And the reason they could read through the QAnon codes is because they were autistic. Elon Musk is autistic. That's why he builds rockets. So they kind of built up this mythos that it's a superpower, which contradicts their position that it's caused by the needle, which they're against. I'm like, you guys should be the most pro Bill Gates if you think it gives you an edge or a superpower. It's like a nootropic. But no. And then schizo is a new one. I've noticed that schizo has been a new buzzword in Trutherville. So schizo is it's a self-identifying term. Like, oh, I'm a schizo. I can see through the fake news. I was like, well, you're not seeing through it if your conclusion is that we live in a video game. Like, oh, the news is fake, so reality's fake. Well, no, you're mistaking your TV set. You're mistaking what the news shows you for a window to the world. It's not a window. It's an interpretation. It's curated. It's highly selective. It lies by omission, and it completely simulates and fabricates events. It's not objective. And if you see something fake on TV, it doesn't follow that reality's fake unless you've been inverted in terms of your epistemology. The way you interpret information is wrong. If instead of being centered on your own senses, your own cognition, your own thoughts, you're actually centered on what comes out of the screen. And then your physical senses are secondary. That's what gaslighting does. Gaslighting trains you to not rely on your own perceptions and to default to the authority. Gaslighting targets your intuition, direct knowledge. It targets your pattern recognition. Like, how do you catch liars? If you've ever caught a liar or a deceiver or a manipulator, you catch them in the patterns. One of the most significant manipulators in my life got away with it for years until I revisited my journals and I was able to discern patterns. And I know for a fact, if I didn't journal it, I would have overlooked every little matrix glitch, every little slip up in the program. I would have noticed I would have still been caught up in it. So of course the system is going to gaslight those who see patterns and call them ill. Oh, you're sick, which makes perfect sense as an immune system for the propaganda matrix. If somebody sees through our worldview simulation, they're candidates for a padded room. It's like they get quarantined so they don't spread their madness. It's kind of like that movie Hot Skulls. Well, it's a series. It's a TV show, Hot Skulls, where everyone's locked down because of mind viruses and the government mandates earplugs. Because if you hear people spewing this toxic information, you'll go crazy too. So anyway, what Satan Watch got right is there is scripting involved. What he got wrong is it means we're in a matrix, that reality's fake. That's not what it means. They can't separate the worldview that they get from media from the real thing. It's like, hello, the model is not the territory. The map is not the territory. It's an interpretation. Conscious Reality says, to be honest with you, unless you're an NPC, I feel that most people are on the spectrum. We have to see it's part of our free thinking. Yeah, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but what I'm saying is that it's like they're appropriating something that they aren't. And as a way of self-identifying, which I understand it's a subculture thing. My problem with it is it's a foot bullet. Like, I'm not going into a conversation with people like, yeah, I'm screwed up, I'm crazy, I got a tinfoil hat, but like, I'm not going to cede the high ground here in terms of like the intellectual high ground. I'm not going to default to, oh, you guys know better because you're with the consensus, because it's the consensus that is screwed up. It's the consensus that lives in a simulation. I'm here from Realville. We're here invading from the off-world stage, walking into the Truman Show. I'm not going to go in there apologetically or self-effacing, like, oh, I don't know what's going on, or my head's slightly unscrewed, I'm a little discombobulated, and I notice, like, I'm not going to make it look like it's a flaw on my part that lets me see through this stuff, that allows me to be critical about what media I consume, that keeps me aware of the fact that we're facing nonstop 24/7 psychological warfare. We have to maintain the high ground, especially the moral high ground. But I totally get with, like, I understand it, is what I'm saying. Even the people, they're being ironic. Like, I'm taking the schizo pill because they're being ironic because they know that what they're perceiving is going to be viewed that way by society. So it's kind of yeah, I get it. It's a subculture thing. My main criticism of it, of course, is that it's associated with far right politics. And I don't want anything to do with politics, nor do the people who adopt this view understand that the world stage is an internalized simulation. They always go to this wrong conclusion that we're in a sim. It becomes escapism, and that's why they will never do anything. It becomes apathy. Yeah, well, we're in a simulation. Okay, well, if we're in a sim, nothing's real, then there's no meaningful distinction to be made between fake news and real news. So what are you doing here? Go enjoy the sim. If I thought this was a sim, I would spend all my time out in the parks, at the movies with my friends, shopping, whatever people do, when they're contented. I wouldn't be doing this. If I thought this was all just a big dream and we have no control and the universe is showing us through the TV screen, I'm like, are you telling me that you're getting divine messages from the television screen? That means that the man behind the curtain has tricked you into believing that the Wizard of Oz is real, not just an illusion. Oh, another Nick to add to the mix. Nicki Minaj, who's now Trump's BFF. I guess they retired Kanye and brought her out. Leo says, are you open for calls? I'm still waiting to get into an office space to take calls. Not quite there yet. I mean, it's only been about 4 months since our main interruption, since I closed the office. And then I've been kind of wandering for 3 months, but I'll be in some stable place here within a week or so. McDirtyWork says, sim or not, we've got liars trying to play us at the higher levels. No, they are playing us. The theater of Psywar. It's already been implemented. It's already been internalized. And if you call it fake or unreal, the believers think you're the enemy. So we were talking about Giancarlo Esposito of Breaking Bad, talking about a violent revolution where millions will die to bring about a new world. And this is the actor who's always playing the antagonist to the Trump character in the movies where the Trump character gets shot. From Megalopolis to Captain America, Brave New World, to The Homelander. He was opposed by Edgar, played by the same actor. And this actor correlates to Obama. So you have this Obama versus Trump dialectic that started with the birther movement. They represent the twin poles, the opposites on the political horseshoe. 1776 versus 1619. But anyway, he's like, they can't take us all down. It's like, well, you first. Breaking Bad actor calls for a revolution against ICE. So he can say something that Obama can't say. Not in such explicit terms. But what I think is intriguing about it, again, is how consistent this is. We've acknowledged the pattern with this actor, the roles he plays, and how it relates to Trump and opposition to Trump. And here we have an example of him stepping off the movie screen and continuing that exact position. I have a breakdown on him. And then also, he was in a TV series called Revolution. In fact, I need to look at this one. Okay, yeah. Revolution is an American post-apocalyptic sci-fi series that ran from September of 2012 to May of 2014. 15 years after the start of a worldwide permanent electrical power blackout. So you got a blackout movie, which correlates with, again, Obama, Leave the World Behind, Obama, American Blackout, that came in 2013. But I think there's more to it. I need to look at his particular role, but this came across my research recently. I was looking at this particular actor, and I think there might have been some deliberate correlation of him with Obama. So he plays Major Tom Neville, an insurance adjuster who joins the militia. He's the antagonist in the story. His troops are responsible for Ben Matheson's death. And this is interesting because Neville is the name of the character in Richard Matheson's I Am Legend, where you get Last Man on Earth and the whole zombie fiction genre of global pandemics and quarantining against the zombies, Walking Dead. Yeah, that all stems from I Am Legend, written by Richard Matheson. These names are just kind of standing out, which does kind of correlate with the content. But anyway, I'm going to look into this Obama linkage with this actor again. Calling for a revolution. Again, not a coincidence. 2012 was also the year that Erika Kirk released or was part of a movie called Black Start about blackouts. Okay, here we go. In 2012, critics noticed similarities between the tyrannical, tech-obsessed regime in Revolution and the Obama administration. They labeled the antagonist an Obama Morpheus tyrant. Okay, so here we go. It's a Mother Jones article. The Obama Morpheus tyrant. The 2012 election was underway during the show's premiere. So there have been some references here correlating him with Obama, correlating revolution. Listen to this. At first glance, you may feel inclined to say, wow, Captain Neville looks and sounds a lot like Barack Obama. Very interesting. Now, I'm just mainly pointing out here the associations that are made between movie characters and the real life are generally intentional. So it's not coincidental that the same actor plays Obama-like characters in opposition to Trump in multiple movies. Most recently, Megalopolis and Sidewinder in Brave New World. What's up, C-Star64? Here is your wrench. All right, continuing here. Oh yeah, here was something else. This actor had filed for bankruptcy after a divorce, and he considered arranging his own murder to provide insurance money for his children before being cast in Breaking Bad. I thought that was kind of an interesting mirror to the Walter White story. Significant turnaround. There's a movie that just came out yesterday or a couple days ago. It was on Friday, called Shelter, starring Jason Statham. And the significance here is that we have seen a lot of movies like Fallout, Paradise, and several others I could mention here that have to do with bunkers, that have to do with shelter, seeking shelter. And I do think that the next quarantine will be for Fallout, which will be fine for me anyway. I can finally catch up on season 2 of Fallout, which probably tells the story. All right, moving on. We already talked about Nick. I got blogs about that. The significance of green. Aiden Ross, the guy who was at 40,000 feet saying the earth is flat, says his higher up connections warn him another quarantine is on the way. As far as the Erika Kirk derangement syndrome, new footage has emerged where apparently she's hanging out with Tyler Robinson. And then she's in another movie called November Renaissance as a sniper. Leo friend said, I assume you've already talked about the Epstein email leaks that are showing he spoke to Moot from 4chan. Leftist types are treating it like gospel. Yeah. Well, that's what I was pointing out earlier, is that it's crazy how it went from a right-wing conspiracy against Democrats to now a left-wing conspiracy against the Republicans. And I did see some connections with the guy named, who goes by Moot. Wasn't, yeah, he was from 4chan. That entire ugly part of the internet just became mainstream. Founder of 4chan. These internet trolls who were creating this meme culture, shock value, offensiveness, and then at one point it just stopped being ironic. But it feels like a resurgence of the whole Q thing. Like I don't even like to read the headlines, but I went to Drudge and it's like Donald Trump accused of this, this, and this with children. I'm like, what? Where are we now? How is this even? Bombshell, Epstein empire bankrolled by KGB. See, that's perfectly geared towards inciting the left. Melania's director, the director of Melania's new movie that just came out. I meant to go watch that. I must have forgot. God, how just tone deaf is that? Like your husband's burning down the country. He's hated. You have these riots going on, these martyrs, and you want to drop some documentary about yourself at this time. But anyway, the director is for some reason associated with Epstein, as is Candace Owens' attorney. No, Erika Kirk's. Sorry, it's Candace Owens' father who cleaned up Sandy Hook. Dark Ghost Wind says before poll it was, oh, that's right. QAnon actually started in 4chan and then it became 8chan. What's up, Richard Jones? Thanks for joining. Yeah, I try to send out live stream notifications an hour prior if I can. I'll try to maintain that. Oh, by the way, I'm starting a work study. Just another way to finance this whole thing. So tomorrow, and I have to tell him, I'm not going to be available at the same time for the Monday night fakeologist. So we're either going to do it like an hour early, or we're going to do it on another day. I'll be working in a computer lab, probably 20 hours a week. It'll be quiet, but it's not bad. I mean, it's practically a passive income source. And what I'm trying to do is position this myself in an office space with new computers where I can kind of centralize our operations. It'll be better than the last office space. It'll be a better location, more convenient. There won't be hobos with campfires outside the window. Leo says, the wildest experience I had was seeing my ex-girlfriend's mom browsing 8chan during Trump's first term. Well, X is the new 8chan. X has just essentially, like, Musk comes out, I got to get rid of the woke mind virus, so I'm buying Twitter. Well, what did he do? He replaced it with the right-wing woke mind viruses. There is a woke right. Look, there were a lot of people, little fires outside my old office space. Transients. I don't know if they were like coming by train or how, but there's a lot of that. And I was at a library the other day printing some shipping labels, and I walked out and I saw a group of people and I just assumed that they were all on fentanyl because the way they were like leaning over, because I'm so used to seeing it in that side of town. But no, they were all just staring into their iPhones. They have that tech neck. People need to think about their posture. Like if you're going to be doom scrolling hours and hours a day and you have your head craned over, that's going to have, it's like repetitive motion injury. I actually damaged my shoulders pretty bad to where I had limited mobility in my right arm for more than a year. I'd wake up at night in pain. And it was from driving when I was doing a lot of transportation jobs, holding the steering wheel at the certain angle I was. It just reset the musculature in my shoulders and I had to repair it. I had to fix it with exercise to repair the position in the socket. Dark Ghost Wind says, 2016 popularizing image board culture might be the worst thing to happen to the internet in a long time. Oh, undeniably. Aesthetically, it's a step down. But that's part of it, though. That's part of the whole idea of the counterculture, flaunting the aesthetic standards of the elite controlled media. Ugliness is actually tactical when it comes to the counter movements. And I think that's why 4chan is just so ghastly. I mean, it's an eyesore. But to be fair, we did steal their frog and put a beak on it. Because I could see what they were doing. I could see the potency of employing memetics in order to get through traditionally gate-kept areas. Leo says they were the easiest mind war casualties for being spoon-fed memes and infographics to pipeline them into Trutherville. That's true. And that's the problem with alternative media in general, is they don't trust the mainstream, but then they're just an open portal for anything labeled anti. That's why I say I'm anti-anti. If you're against the establishment and that's your position, I'm anti-establishment, I'm probably against you. Because the anti-establishment is part of the establishment. It's a very simple ruse. People fall for it still. Dark Ghost Wind says, X might honestly be worse than HM because the user base and poster rates is off the charts. It's unusable. Well, X is definitely worse in terms of censoring stuff because the racial caricatures, the misogynistic stuff, a lot of the real like nasty identity politics stuff used to be confined to, you know, these image board landfills, like out of sight, out of mind. They were all anonymous image boards because nobody would want to be associated with that stuff in their real life. I had a stalker once, cyber stalker. And it was the result of me posting on certain boards having to do with Scientology. And next thing you know, these anonymous people think I'm a Scientologist and they start, you know, harassing me online. And what I did was I found one of them. I found out she was a big 4chan poster. And I remember faxing a lot of her posts to her place of employment. Like, there's a reason why you don't want to touch that stuff. It's toxic. But now it's mainstream. And I was just kind of surprised. Like, how did this stuff just get a pass? Anti-Antifa. Exactly. I'm not pro-Antifa. I'm not anti-Antifa. I'm non. Like some people are like, well, I'm anti-Bill Gates. I'm anti-vax. I'm against that. Well, good for you. Because now you're marching lockstep with a whole lot of brainwashed zombies. And you're part of a belief cluster. You're politicized. You're feeding the matrix. Good for you. Are you, like, if you don't smoke cigarettes or drink, are you anti-cigarettes, anti-alcohol? I don't drink Pepsi or carbonated soft drinks. Am I anti-Pepsi? No. I'm a non-Pepsi user. I'm a non-smoker. I'm not an anti-smoker. So why can't you be a non? That's where we're at. We're nons here. Off-world stage is non. If you're an anti, you will get pushed off the raft. We only have to push you off. Because if you carry any red pill propaganda off-world stage, you don't really stay buoyant in the raft. You will sink. You will sink into the sea of irrelevance. You'll be submerged in the misinformation pool because every one of these instances of psyop propaganda undermines your objectivity, puts you into their fictional universe. Sink Lloyd says, Stanley was in the bar, saw a nightingale, and gave Bill the password. I don't know what that means, but here's your blue wrench. All right, let me get back to my Twitter scroll. Ed Norton said, "I'm sitting here talking about movies while an illegal army is being mounted against citizens. We need a national general economic strike." I would say that might correlate with his Fight Club character, Project Mayhem. But what's interesting about him is that he was in American History X. And American History X is about this skinhead who goes to jail after curb stomping somebody. But in that movie, he goes on a long tirade about immigrants and how they're stealing resources. Everything we heard from Nick Shirley about Somalians, all these claims that anti-immigrant activists make, he was making in that movie. So it's interesting that he goes from being in favor of deportation from a white nationalist perspective to now being anti-ICE, calling for a national strike and opposition to it. Again, it's a repeated pattern here. These actors are propaganda conduits. Their personas that you see on TV are an extension of a manufactured character that you saw in a movie. They're not really authentic. A Newful says, "Hey, Tim, what do you think the end goal of quarantine fallout, the implementation of UBI?" It could be it. I don't know. I mean, here's one thing I do think about the quarantine thing. I think the entire concept of quarantining is part of our modern paradigm that is an updated version of something older. So the idea of saved and unsaved, the concepts of sin, sinners, heathens, the saved, those who are compliant with the church, those who are heretics, they've reintroduced all these dynamics into our modern paradigm using things like pandemics, the virus, climate change, which is a modern iteration of a flood myth. Original sin has been brought back as carbon footprint. The church is now media. And if you listen to the church and you take their Eucharist that they prescribe, you will be saved. And those who don't listen, the conspiracy theorists, are not saved. So they're still carriers of sin, aka super spreaders of the virus that they refuse to vax away because they don't trust the church. It's a reiteration of an old concept because sin is a way that the priesthood can manage every person. How many people can hang out in a house? They can basically regulate everything about you. What's your status? Are you saved or unsaved? No more privacy. Now we get to know what's in your blood. That's now a matter of compelling state interest that you disclose that. So the eradication of the individual, I think it's all about collectivism. What's up, Apocalypse Theme Park? Dark Ghost Wind says, "Do you think the stuff with ICE is Rex 84 adjacent?" Rex 84 is a classified 1984 government drill designed to test the detention of large numbers of American residents and foreign nationals during a national emergency. It envisioned rounding up 500,000 undocumented residents in FEMA-run military camps. Yeah, I've only ever heard Rex 84 from, I think Alex Jones mentioned it once, back when they talked about FEMA coffins. But when it comes to the idea of large-scale detention centers, I tend to think that that's mostly hype and fear because they've already converted every home into a FEMA camp and every citizen into their own prison warden. 2020 revealed this. When I saw that, I was like, well, there's no need to gather all the free thinkers together where we might have fun. I mean, that would be great. All expense paid. We had it's like FEMA camp, like summer camp. We did an art show in Denver. We called it FEMA camp for that reason. And people got mad at me. People said, don't make light of FEMA. It was flat earth music and art. People were mad at me for it. Like, FEMA has coffins, big coffins. It's like, those aren't coffins. Those are burial vaults. The reason why you don't sink into the ground when you walk through a cemetery is they have these inverted plastic tubs over the casket so they can pack the dirt on without imploding everything and without having to worry about the ground caving in at some point. But I heard about this FEMA coffin thing for a long time, and I thought, these are too big. Like, oh, it's because they're going to put multiple people in these. Oh, really? How are you going to put 6 or 7 or 10 bodies in one of these things and move it? And if the whole purpose of your new world order is to exterminate everybody, what makes you think they're going to do you the dignity of a funeral and a grave that's marked? A Newful says, ice stuff reminds me of the Japanese stuff after Pearl Harbor, but now towards Latinos. Yeah, what was that called? The Japanese internment camps. There was a book about it I came across. Japanese Americans forced to leave their homes and live in camps for most of the war. Executive Order 9066, 100,000. I don't know if that's a fair comparison. But I mean, I'm looking at the stats. I'm like, are they really only getting rid of felons, criminals, gang members? I don't know. But you have to also consider that it's all about perception, because these activists will get themselves arrested to create the perception of something that's out of control. That's what provocateurs do. You know, cry bullies. It's a tactic. So I don't trust activists. I don't trust activism. I don't trust the perception created by either extreme. Leo says the idea was ghastly. FEMA coffins and Walmarts being converted to prison camps. Yeah, I knew people who believed that Walmart was a potential prison camp and that there's tunnels beneath the Walmarts. Oh, yeah, and they said Walmart stands for martial law. And I've worked at a Walmart, and you couldn't use that to contain people. They're like, oh, FEMA's going to take over for the distribution of food and stuff. And there's a reason why that rumor came out. I think Sam Walton had some kind of contract that they would somehow assist in emergencies. Let me see if I can find. There was something, but it wasn't sinister. But I haven't heard that one in a long time. A lot of these conspiracy theories have a shelf life and they eventually die. Like, people used to freak out about UPC codes being the mark of the beast. They're always often recycling them too. Dr. Bass Ackworth says they're doing the Super Bowl in my town. Are you going to go? We need witnesses. I don't believe they would ever do a psychological operation that would panic non-actors on a large scale. Like, the Super Bowl is probably going to be the safest place on earth. And I noticed there has been this trend, and I blocked most of them, so I don't see this anymore. But a lot of the gematria calculator wizards are saying, oh, is this many days from this Super Bowl to this date, and it means they're going to nuke us on the Super Bowl. Like, every Super Bowl Sunday is looked at as a potential apocalypse day. It's like, no, that's not how it works. It's going to be a big nothing burger, and you're going to put all your focus and attention into what? Absorbing the advertisements. Dark Ghost Wind says these conspiracy theories are planted. Never believe anything you hear from David Icke. I've moved away from the idea that we can identify agents so easily, but you can pretty much disregard anybody if they adhere to the alternative media orthodoxies. So it doesn't matter if they're agents or operatives or just normal people who believe a lot of conspiracy theories, they're still part of the establishment. And I consider David Icke and Alex Jones to be voices of the establishment. They're just playing on the other side. Again, conspiracy theories are all part of a big conspiracy to keep alternative minds in a cul-de-sac, in an environment, in an information environment where they're not going to put together the puzzle pieces to see through the simulation. And when I say simulation, I don't mean we're video game characters like some people do. When I say simulation, I'm talking about the internalized map of the world that is curated by Big Brother, augmented by his lies. When you have the off-world stage perspective, the main difference is you're aware of the continuity of fabrications and you're outside of it. If you're not aware of it and you haven't consciously stepped outside of it, you are by definition programmed. That's why I call this the IPS deprogram, because we are not programming. Like, oh, this is back to the program. Welcome to the show. This isn't really a show, nor am I part of the program or programming anybody. Conscious reality says, I swear everything that happened 6 years ago is on repeat or it's a sequel. Yeah, that's what I'm suggesting, is that we're living in Groundhog Day. The masses of news consumers have no long-term memory when it comes to fake events and psyops. How is the Epstein thing being recycled like it is when it never reached a resolution? There's no resolution for any of these things. They never resolve any of these conspiracies. They just move on to the next one. This is what we would call the sea of irrelevance, where there's just so much that it loses its relevance. There's too much to process, and it seems like endless distraction, which causes people to look away. And there used to be this trend, it's probably still there, but I ignore it, of truthers who say, oh, it's all fake, it's a distraction, don't look. Move on with your life. And I'm saying that's the wrong answer. What we're doing is we are systematizing our empirical research. It's the great deconstruction. It's already started. It's happening at the Discord server. We're consolidating our research on every fake event into a timeline. Not just labeling it fake, but analyzing the event in its context of concurrent and predictive programming and the actors, metascriptors, and writers involved. We're reverse engineering a century of fake history. Meanwhile, the mud flutters are staring at old black and white photos with their jaws dropped because they can't figure out how stonemasonry looks so beautiful. It's like, yeah, it looks incredible, but you don't need to imagine it's some alien technology. But the mud flutters and others who are obsessed with the idea that our history has been fabricated don't look at recent history. It's like, instead of looking back at something you can't test and verify, why not pay attention to the fact that your daily news becomes history? And it accumulates. It's persistent. And the simulated events, these staged events that become chapters in our history books, these are persistent. These are part of the architecture of the world stage, which is what we are dedicated to deconstructing. So the great deconstruction is the IPS think tank's objective right now, which is to deconstruct and separate the two timelines so that as more people see through the program, they have a landing spot. The off-world stage is a stable philosophical position, a position to observe the world and to think of things that is inclusive of an understanding of fake news, what I call history bending. But I'm going to make it very easy for people who step off the world stage to see it all in the proper context. We have to break the West world syndrome. And I call it that for a few reasons. One, because people are caught in a loop. They're not looking at the long-term, pre-scripted fake events to come, or the consequence of real and fake merging in the past, or fake history. You know, the context is the most important facet, I think, to elucidate. A Newful says, so after Epstein comes Hunter Biden's laptop. Let's see if I can predict the future. Right. It's one thing after another, but nothing ever reaches resolution. But this Westworld syndrome is what I refer to the idea that your limited perspective in terms of time keeps you locked in. And whenever somebody in Westworld is shown something that would shatter the illusion, their programming kicks in and they all say, that doesn't look like anything to me. So I'm like, hey, look at these connections between this event and all these movies and all these narratives that correspond to these characters on the world stage. And look at how the people who consume this entertainment also got hit with the psyops. Look at these connections. They'll say, that doesn't look like anything to me. That's schizo. That's mental illness. Like, okay, synth, stay in your simulation. The White House released a video about AI with clear messages. It shows an underground base in Greenland where Trump, Melania, and Barron make contact with extraterrestrials. You know, the Q people are eating that up. Yeah, that's something. I was asking about this a few months ago. I said, where are all the Q people owning up to the fact that they got everything wrong? They think they're just going to get away with that? No, you spent a good part of your life, you know, a good chunk of your life, 4 years, retweeting essentially conspiracy slop, and none of it was true. You alienated yourself and your family over this. You became overtly politicized, more deeply immersed in the matrix than normies. None of it comes true. And yet they don't come out and say, hey, I was wrong. I hit the Q pipe, but I'm clean now. I don't hear any of them asking for forgiveness. And if they do, I might consider it. But I consider the whole Q movement to have been a subversive movement set up by the government created counterculture meant to sabotage this, meant to sabotage any rational interpretation of the propaganda. I remember I lost one friend to this. She was like, well, don't you want to save the children? I'm like, well, I don't want to say no. Don't you want to save, like, oh, you don't believe Q? Don't you want to save the children from the cabal of satanic abusers who will kill the children and drink their brain fluids? Like, it's kind of hard to say no to that. Like, no, I'm cool. It's like, yeah, I want to save the children, obviously. It's like, don't you want to wear the AIDS ribbon? But that's the kind of group think hive mind that took possession of a large swath of our initial Discord server. And I was like, good riddance. If you've got maids, if you have a compromised mental immune system and you can't prevent these mind viruses from hijacking your entire psyche, then you're better off there in Trutherville, looking on the ground for breadcrumbs like junkies. Clucks. This is a slang term I heard, referring to people who are digging in the ground like chickens, scratching around for rocks, crack rocks. They called them clucks. And I was like, that's kind of how these Q people are, looking for their breadcrumbs. It's like, it's 8 years after the fact. They're bringing out another Q drop and trying to apply it to the news. Oh, look, Q said this would happen. What do you mean? That 8 years ago, some anonymous intel insider, some government insider, dropped a clue about something that wouldn't be relevant for like a decade later. Like, that is the worst, dumbest conspiracy in the world. Yeah, Clux spelled with a Q, exactly. Yeah, when I say crackhead, I spell it with a Q when I'm talking about these QAnon people, because it is a drug. It is an addiction. Media is a drug. I think we can agree. Media is a drug for all intents and purposes, and you can get addicted in the same way. Like, you can get addicted to a slot machine. And the Q movement was built on this, where they would lose hope, they would encourage each other. I would see them on Twitter, like, "Oh, I thought Trump was going to get rid of the deep state," and then Trump would wink at the camera at 17 seconds on a YouTube video, and they'd say, "See, that's him. He's telling us he's still fighting the deep state." So they get this validation, like, okay, we're on the right track. They get this dopamine rush, like they hit the jackpot, and then they go through another cold spell. And that random affirmation, that random indicator that they're winning the fight, is enough to keep them hooked. They get hooked on an addiction cycle. Capture Loop says Q was January 6th as the Patriots queued up to storm the Capitol. Yes, there is nothing organic about January 6th. Anybody who was arrested is a crisis actor. Owen Schroyer is obviously a crisis actor. What an absurd character. Nobody died on January 6th. That staged riot was just essentially a movie set, a closed movie set. Dr. Bass Ackworth says, I remember when the Q thing started, there was real stuff being exposed, dots connected, and then the ridiculous stories started. I think they really went into a fantasy parallel universe when they introduced JFK still alive. Like, oh yeah, Q is JFK. He survived. He's 117 now. Walking around with a scar on his head, but he's directing from, they had some island somewhere. And that's not even a new conspiracy theory. I think it was called the Hidden King of Camelot. Let me see if I can find that. There was this conspiracy that I think even Miles Mathis wrote about it, but it was this whole thing about the Hidden Kings. Miles Mathis. I have an article if you want to look at it, but the whole concept of the Kennedys being this royal bloodline fighting against the synagogue of Satan, like, it builds into this idea of the deep state versus the white hats. And that Trump was working with JFK, and JFK Jr. faked his death to get away from what would have been death by the Clintons. They had a name for that. Wasn't there a name for getting killed by the Clintons? I think it had, because there's like, how many Clinton deaths were there? That's another one of those, like, they were like, oh, the Clintons have already been taken to Guantanamo, and Obama too. And Tom Hanks, they were all killed by Q for crimes against humanity. It's like, well, they're still on TV. How do you explain that? And the Q people would say, well, the truth is so dark and so hard to accept that they can't tell the public, but they can tell us through these clues. Like, the truth isn't for everyone, is what I heard. In fact, the cope was so bad, again, spelled with a Q, the cope was so bad, they would say, oh no, Biden didn't win, Trump won. Yeah, Arkansas, it was Arkansas. Trump did in fact win the 2020 election. And the reason why he has 45-47 on his hat is that he's president 45, 46, and 47. But the public can't know, so they installed a puppet, Jim Carrey, in a Biden mask. It's all a movie, just eat your popcorn. That was their refrain. It's all just a movie. We're living in a movie. I talked to a nonner recently. They weren't really open about it, but I know the code. I was at a party. I heard a QAnoner person, probably a big fan of RFK Jr. And at one point, she was like, "It's all just a movie," and she started making this motion like she was eating popcorn. And I was like, "Okay, that's where you're at." Apocalypse Theme Park says zero evidence that any of this Epstein stuff happened. Just words on a screen. I thought the whole thing was fake and contrived. From the moment I saw his body on a stretcher from the ambulance's perspective, because ambulance drivers don't photograph their patients in transit. That's a major violation, a major privacy violation. Okay, so Kennedy, The Hidden Kings, I posted a link, Miles Mathis, and this came out, it was first written in 2007, so this is way before Q, way before that. And he says here, these stories are created as misdirection and disinformation. Alternate theorists are controlled by the government. But anyway, in this article, he breaks down this idea that the Kennedys have continued their existence on some island somewhere. And this kind of got merged with the Q stuff. Let me see if I can. It's a long art. It's 88 pages. It's a long piece. So I'm not going to find it all here, but I see the Q movement as actually a government manufactured conspiracy culture designed to take all these conspiracy theorists and sell them on the idea that not only are you correct about everything, but Trump's going to solve it. And then it also has this element of a Ponzi scheme. You know, Ponzi scheme where you throw all your assets into something because you're an insider and you think you're going to have a big payoff at the end, but you're actually getting rug pulled. And a lot of people were investing in what they saw as, quote, the Great Awakening, where they thought that, hey, when the Great Awakening happens, all of your friends and family who mocked you are going to come to you for answers. I've heard that from so many of these Q people. Like, I forgive them for calling me a conspiracy theorist because eventually they're going to come to me. So they invest all of their social media capital. They turn their Facebook social media into political advocacy. They alienate people. And as they get alienated, who do they have to relate to now? Well, they just gather with other people with similar beliefs. And there's an endless supply. Most of them are probably bots. And they think there's going to be some big payoff at the end, some great awakening. And it never happened. Where's your great awakening now? Great awakening for the right, great reset for the left. So the left was like, yeah, there's going to be a great reset. And everything's going to be ideal, utopian, universal basic income. And the right's like, that's bad. And the right's like, no, we're going to have a great awakening. And we're going to expose the deep state. And then we're going to get money from the government. Yeah, the Q people had something called Nasara Gasara, some kind of emergency funding where everybody's going to get universal basic income. So great reset, great awakening. What's the difference? There is no difference. Dark Ghost Wind says, funnily enough, shortly after the Q nonsense, the Brenton Tarrant shooting happened, which resulted in 8chan shutting down. Yeah, they also banned BitChute in a few places. Yeah, Brenton Tarrant, shout out to PewDiePie. One of my favorite fake events. That's actually when I didn't know what squibs were until the Brenton Tarrant shooting. One of my main criticisms is that much of his manifesto was recycled from Anders Breivik. Again, the Christ Church, 2 mosques, 2 drills. No, there were like 3. There were drills going on that day. If you didn't see the footage from the second mosque, you have no business calling this thing real. I mean, you had a guy walking around with a Windex bottle full of fake blood, And then you had some other guy walking by in this white garb with red spots on it, like posing for the camera. You had people on the ground, dead people getting up. Dead people don't get up. But in the second mosque, there were dead people in one of the cell phone videos, because when you're getting shot at, what do? Like that guy at Bondi Beach, shot in the head, and he starts live streaming it. Yeah, people start recording with their phones. But there was one guy in particular in a jacket who got up. I'm like, you're not supposed to get up yet. Apocalypse says, Chans are at the forefront of social engineering. Yeah, so this Q movement is also repackaged blood libel. It's nothing about it is original. It's another Frankenstein monster. It's an amalgamation, has a lot of different sources. They even added a huge element of the cult, the I Am movement, Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And the I Am movement is based on this idea. It's a new age thing, that there's a number of people who have transcended the physical realm, but they stay behind, and you can channel them so you can continue to fight against darkness. They call them the Brotherhood of the White Brotherhood. So the white hats correlate to the White Brotherhood, this secret war between the white hats and the black hats. And then you have this other element where the Q movement believed that they had a lot of dead celebrities who actually faked their deaths, including JFK, so they could fight the deep state from behind the scenes. So they had their own version of the ascended masters. And how do you get them? You channel them. How do you reach the dead celebrities? You go to the chans and you decode the messages. So this idea of, through these message boards, you're interacting with this secret group fighting the deep state. Yeah, that's very much in line with the secret war template. And then it even turns out, this is the bizarre part, is that one of the leaders in the Q movement, General Michael Flynn, actually had his group of QAnon people reciting these invocations of the archangels from the I Am movement. Not even biblical stuff, but like literally verbatim the writings, the teachings, the prayers of Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And what a name, Clare Prophet. She prophesied that China and Russia would nuke America. And her followers sold their stuff, moved into a bunker, and prayed because America was going to get nuked. And guess what happened? It didn't happen. But the cult didn't go away. They believed that they're so powerful that they prayed away the nukes. So they essentially saved the world. So shout out to the I Am movement. Thanks for saving us. But that's what happens with cults, especially doomsday cults. When it doesn't come true, it actually affirms for them that it's more likely to come true later. Or if it doesn't come true, it's because they prevented it. So they can't lose. It's a win-win proposition. They can't admit that they're wrong. And that's the ego. We talk about guardrails. What's keeping people locked in the media simulation? Well, for one, the literal belief that people die in psyops. They don't. If you think they're being killed in some ritual, what's your evidence? Because that's crap. I come across some pretty insightful people. I'm not going to name channels, but they notice patterns. But they say stuff like, well, Charlie Kirk was killed in a ritual. He had to be. It was a sacrifice. Okay, until you drop that premise that they're killing people in simulated events, you're not going to escape the cage. But beyond the bloody guardrail, and I tested it, it's theatrical blood. Beyond the bloody guardrail, there's one more, and that's the ego. That's the inability to admit that you've been wrong about something and maybe even promulgated false information for a long time. Sadly and pathetically, a lot of people aren't going to exit the program. They're not going to update their operating system because they won't be able to admit they were wrong about this or that conspiracy theory. And for me, I'm like, please prove me wrong. If I'm wrong, let me know. It'll save me some time. I'm not into wrong answers. Big Hair Tsunami here with another box of wrenches. Mike Archangel, Harmon Walker. I'm going to hand out wrenches, by the way. So if you are in the chat and you speak up, you will be handed a moderator wrench. So you're essentially pre-vetted. Welcome to the Blue Wrench Lodge, LBB store. And it's Snoopy 333. When you have the blue wrench, it means that you can automatically ban anybody who speaks out of turn if they're not one of us. Bach Precision, Citizen 2072, Retrospectology Runner. And we're engaging in a lot of retro auto hoaxing. Rome, Brandon, Slow Boy, Whiteboard, K-Swan 5, Janky Frame Covers, Ryler 05, Pura Vida. You're all getting access to members only archives and postings. Rocco Calzone, Henrik 4794. I'm passing out a lot of these things, so bear with me. It also means that you can post links. That was the original reason why I started, because we were creating this think tank. We didn't have Discord, and I was able to get links that people were recommending in that way. Rayo Flight says an armed society is a polite society, as always. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. JDM ZRX says Art Bell used to have Elizabeth Clare Prophet on the air back in the day. You know, Art Bell and Whitney Strieber. Strieber's the guy who wrote the alien abduction. What is the category? Is it horror? Is it romance? You know, the alien probers. He and Art Bell wrote The Coming Superstorm, which is the first example of climate fiction. And Art Bell's also responsible for a bunch of people who are confused about condensation trails. All right, and RJ2 has received a gift membership by Big Hair Tsunami. But when this channel started, we were inundated with trolls, with disruptors, with defenders of mainstream and alternative media. And it wasn't productive to let them take up all the air. They would spam the chats. YouTube was Wild West. It was less controllable back then. So what we did is we instituted the policy of vetting everyone, handing them a wrench. And the vetting process was easy. How many people died at fill in the blank? If your answer was anything higher than 0, you weren't let into the club. You would get clubbed, and we would leave you in the dungeon. But if you emailed me at infiniteplainsociety@gmail.com and said, I'm sorry, nobody died, you could get in, and I would pull you out of the dungeon. So there was a cycle where you would show up in the chat room, there'd be 400 wrenches, and you'd get swatted. And then by that evening, I would have you brought out and added to the tank. And that allowed us to consolidate our best ideas, to share links, and to maintain a productive conversation that went along with our open phones, our live streams. A Newful says, I'd love to see what happened if you made a call to skeptics YouTubers like The Line and explain to them this perspective. Well, here's what's going to happen. We're consolidating the deprogrammed. If someone's 80% of the way out, they're ours. They're coming off world stage. They're not going to stick around in Trutherville. Once we have an adequate number of active participants, that's when we can accelerate things. That's when we will, in a very targeted and structured and systematic way, we will confront every single media skeptic that is still operating from within the world stage paradigm. Because if you're in the world stage paradigm, you're wrong. It doesn't matter what your opinions are. When it comes to media, you're fundamentally wrong. And we have receipts. we've done our homework. Like, show me your work. Like, you can't cheat here. You can't use AI. You can't outsource your intel. Like, if you are making a claim, you should be able to show your work. When I say Charlie Kirk is alive and well, if that's even his real name, but not only is he alive and well and not dead, but we can infer from this other people who are involved in this and how extensive it is. We know that Erika Kirk is not only playing the role of a grieving widow, she's playing the role of a grieving widow who might have been behind her husband's assassination. Like, that's how deep the story goes. It's all contrived. I mean, I really see this as a litmus test. But you're not going to arrive at the right conclusion if you have the wrong perspective. So when I say that you're wrong about everything, if you're still contained in the world stage, I mean it literally, because the world stage is a closed informational system. Someone said to me a couple months ago, like, can't you be open-minded? Maybe the mainstream's not lying. I'm like, I'm sorry, but we're the only open-minded ones here. Because if your interpretation of media is contained within a closed informational system with limited options, then you're not open-minded. The open-minded position includes not only the pro and the anti positions, but also includes the perspective that has awareness of media fakery, psyops, how entertainment is fused with the psychological operations. And then we go further with this and extrapolate, well, what can we say based upon what we know regarding the alignment, the entrainment with entertainment and fake news? So there's quite a lot to unravel that you won't even start unraveling until you step out of their Truman Show. Def Photo says, longtime listener. I appreciate that. Dark Ghost Wind says, they can't operate outside the paradigm because it defines their entire worldview. To say these events are fake is an attack on their identity. Exactly. That's the ego guardrail. And then there's also those who have made their living supplying conspiracy slop to alternative media consumers. So if you're serving conspiracy claptrap to red pillars, to people who've left Alex Jonestown and are looking for another fix, you're just as bad as the mainstream. Eddie F says, remember that movie Atropia about how fake war is? I've been waiting to watch it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Atropia is about a village that it's a full-time 24/7 war simulation full of crisis actors, animatronic donkeys that explode. And the whole thing is about how, yeah, they're graphically simulating war scenarios to prepare people for war. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. A Newful says, make a special show about calling other YouTubers as experimentation to see the reaction to the chats. Now you understand it. Because the strategy here is, I'm not trying to change the minds of some clinger, some bloody guardrail clinger, some corpse clutcher. Somebody who's still clinging to the alternative take on things, or someone who thinks they're in a simulation or whatever. I'm not trying to change their minds. What I'm trying to do is reach their subscribers. So we can point out, well, who do you want to follow? Somebody who's adhering to this duopoly, who has a series of talking points that are mirrored by those on the other side. Somebody who's being spoon-fed, recycled, regurgitated conspiracy slop from known and well-exposed operatives? Or do you want to enter a third platform that doesn't have any kind of controlled opposition presence? And that's why we have to maintain our standards. Like, no, we're not letting our standards drop to be more inclusive. No, we are exclusive for the deprogrammed. And again, those who are programmed, who try to roll with us are going to find it to be incompatible with their worldview, too challenging. They'll cry, they'll fight for their programming, but will essentially disregard their uninformed opinions, misinformed opinions. I mean, the default is misinformed. But if you're not aware of the world stage as a model, you can't possibly be outside of it. If you're not aware of the twin timelines, real and fake, that are being merged in the minds of the media consumers, you're not outside of the program. If you're not aware of the long-term effects of fake news accumulation, news bending and history bending, well, then your worldview is bent. It's actually that simple. And the litmus test here is discernment. Can you discern between real and fake? And I get these groups of people, occasionally individuals would rise up once in a while and say, well, I don't know if it's real or fake. I'm confused. Unlike you, with all your certainty, as though having certainty is a sign that I'm closed-minded. And I'm like, no, actually, the fact that you're confused means you don't have independent thinking. It means you can't rest on your own perceptions. It means you're still leaning on Big Brother's interpretation as a crutch. It means you're complicit in your own gaslighting. So no, we don't have to, we're not lowering our standards because it's sink or swim on the individual basis. You can't fake this. You can't fake being deprogrammed. You can posture as being confused or ambiguous as though it means you're open to being wrong, but that's a false posture. I mean, honestly, the facts are there to support what we're describing. Some people are uncomfortable when I say that we're right, but we are. We are correct. And if that hurts your mind, that's on you. We have correctly discerned the architecture of the world stage model, and it doesn't match the territory. It isn't the territory. These things get conflated. Again, fake news doesn't mean fake reality. What's up, Michael Lito? Thanks for joining. All right, so we've been live here for about 2 hours and 27 minutes. Before we go, I'm going to put a link in the chat. If you want to follow my notes, things that I consider noteworthy, there's my Twitter feed, IPS Think Tank. And to get back to what A. Newfel said, we do, in fact, that is the next phase. The next phase is the confrontation. And they're not ready for it. Mainstream can't touch it. Alternative can't touch it. It's above their pay grade. It undermines their positions, their worldviews. They have a vested interest in alternative lies. And all the while, they're still on the fence. They're still sitting on some guardrail. Like, you guys might have a point, but I'm going to keep one foot in the matrix. Okay, well, that entire time that you're being a fence squatter, that the whole time that you're refusing to be independent in thinking, and you're just waiting for, I don't know, approval or something by a larger number of people, you're wasting time. Like, that's the starting line. Getting off world stage is the starting line. Like, we've already left a long time ago. We've already been advancing the conversation, introducing clarity into what is confusion by design. Confusion is what we're dealing with, because the merging of real and fake is by definition confusion. We are in the unconfused, like the upside down. This is the, and you can't fake being unconfused. This is mind war inoculation. It talks about people who have maids. Yeah, there's a cure for maids, and it's infinite plane radio. It's applied skepticism. But you also have to, it also has, I think, something of a perk or a benefit, which is detaching from the news cycle. When you detach from the news cycle, it no longer emotionally triggers a reaction. And what do you think they use crisis actors for? And these emotional appeals. It's because they can tap into your emotions to override the intellect. They want to hijack your mind. Well, if you're not emotionally invested in the bread and circus S show, they're not going to get anything out of you. And so when I look at the news, I study the stuff, I'm not immersing myself in stressful ideas. I'm not worried about the world. I'm not a news junkie. I'm not doom scrolling. I'm actually very much detached from the world stage. Outside of the world stage is very peaceful. You see, because it's mind war. War is peace. We do live in an Orwellian society, and the mind war that they implant into the Truman Show keeps everybody in a perpetual state of internal conflict, mind war. Enemies everywhere, threats everywhere. We live in the end times. You think that's a ridiculous, archaic religious concept? No, it's actually mainstream. Ask the scientists. We're in the end times. But I'm not in their mind war. I'm not a participant. That's why I'm not taking sides. If you take sides on anything, you're participating. And I offered something for those who are still stuck on anti, because I get it. You know, you spend years and years advocating for an anti position because it feels like the right thing to do. Well, that's because you only had two options in this media duopoly. You're either pro or anti the thing. And both sides are extreme. Well, you have another option here. And the option here is non. Like I'm a non. I'm a non whatever it is that you're against and whatever you are for. And the world stage does not acknowledge the non position. They do not acknowledge it. So we're not censored. We're just not acknowledged. And by ignoring us, by not looking at this or addressing it from a main or alternative perspective, they've only allowed us time to gestate. Like for a long time, I was thinking, okay, we're being censored or being suppressed, but trying to stay in their system isn't working. And then I realized we need to stop relying on their air. We don't want to breathe their air. We don't want to curry favor with mainstream or alternative. We're not seeking to be respectable on their stage. Like, no, we're bringing our own air supply. We're bringing our own resources to this thing. We are a complete divergence from main and alternative thought. And we're, as such, you know, we're informed about the thing in such a way that we're completely alien to them. When auto hoaxers en masse start confronting alt media, they won't know what to do but ignore us, which has been the pattern. But they can ignore us, but their followers won't be able to. And many of their followers will likely take a look at what we're talking about. And my job here, my primary objective, and this is why I've been working so intently with infographics, because we're trying to describe something that's invisible, this invisible compartmentalization, this invisible cage. My objective here is to condense these concepts into concise breakdowns that can be easily transmissible. Like we're essentially engineering the ultimate auto hoax mind virus, and we're going to unleash it. And I know from past experience, and many of you here maybe were here around the time of the Nipsey Hussle death hoax. We at one point had 1,500 live stream listeners, and my videos would get 10 to 100,000 hits. Our numbers were much higher. In fact, the income was much higher. That's how we paid for that event in Las Vegas at the Plaza. Like we had money to fund our operations. And I think that's one of the things that was primarily attacked is the ability to finance any truly independent operation. But instead of looking at that and giving up and saying, oh, we can't compete here, I kind of looked at that as this is how you grow an anti-fragile organization. You figure out how to exist without any dependencies. And then you come in without any need of their approval, and you just go full on assault Let's deconstruct the world stage and watch these individuals who are influencers on the world stage attempt damage control. And I'm looking forward to it because I think this confrontation, which will be unending, but I think this confrontation is going to be a big reveal. What I really see in the future is a much needed disruption to take place in what is in fact a closed informational system. And my sights are only on alt media. I don't care about the mainstreamers. I don't care about the left woke. They're unsalvageable. They're married to the system. They're 100% sold out. But the people in alt media are there by default because they responded to their intuition, they responded to critical thinking, and they left the mainstream, but with nowhere to go, they ended up in Trutherville. A big cul-de-sac, being led in circles, chasing red herrings, picking up those breadcrumbs. But that can be forgiven. You can understand it. There's a limited number of options. That's why we're splintering, and that's why we have a separate platform. But the next stage is really numbers. Anyway, we'll continue this conversation in the Discord server. I'll update you via newsletter as to Fakeologist and I, because I start work study tomorrow. I got a bit of work, so I'm not going to be available at the same time. So it might be earlier. Anufel says, you need to read Julius Evola. You're getting to the archetype he wanted to see. I'll take a look at that. Yeah, thanks for all the support. Big Hair Tsunami. Thank you for keeping fuel in the think tank. And, you know, the fuel is comments, research, ideas, and funding obviously is a big part of it. And that's why I took this work study job, because we need to upgrade everything. I have a lot of plans. We got blueprints. We have this press corps with more than 150 press pass carriers that just needs to be activated. So it's a big juggernaut. It's a big machine. And I'm just getting parts for it. We're putting it all together. It's a long-term agenda. One of the reasons I decided to resume my work towards a degree in journalism is that I can see doors opening that will help this operation, because this is a long-term thing. And I want this vision to be fully realized. And I'm kind of reticent about the very specific strategies that we'll be employing, because I don't want to give them a heads up. We want to blind side the propagandists. We have to be outside of their experience. We have to be above their present level of understanding. And I think a lot of them are under a veil of ignorance for their own good. And it's part of the compartmentalization process. We are decompartmentalized. They have everyone's minds. They're mentally put into these boxes. They're compartmentalized so they don't see the totality of this entire system. They don't see the big picture. They're stuck in their news cycles. All right, anyway, tomorrow is Groundhog's Day and Candlemas. Anything else? And of course, the Super Bowl is coming up. I'm looking forward to the halftime show and the predictable response. I mean, this is just every year, isn't it? Every year, it's just like contrived outrage. I'm glad to see a lot of longtime think tankers showing back up, because I think that once our signal gets big enough, anybody who's ever been involved in the think tank will find their way back. It's not like you go off world stage and you see through the stuff, and then suddenly you take a break and now you're like, what was I thinking? Let me go back to mainstream. That doesn't happen. Nobody goes back. It's a one-way trip. And that's because I call it an upgrade. It's a new operating system. When you take this perspective and you see the big picture, you can't unsee it, because it's true, because it's accurate, because it's discernible, it's testable, and it's the result of empirical research. And we have years of research behind us that we're consolidating. We're going to create this encyclopedia of hoaxes in a timeline, as you'll see. I don't have a specific time frame for completing this project, but I think it'll be launchable sometime this spring. All right, thanks again. We'll see you all in Discord.